Hey, welcome back to Contractor Evolution. Benji and Igor here at the studio.
People have been complaining about kids these days since before the dawn of time. This whole young people are entitled and don't know how good they have it thing isn't new. And it seems to be an especially well-used trope in trades and construction. And I get it. When you have young 20-somethings demanding a higher hourly wage than you ever made, and the quality of their work is a little suspect, it's tough not to be a bit cynical. This puts you in a really tough spot though, because as infuriating as some of these Gen-Zers and Millennials are to you, the physically demanding nature of your business means you need to find a way to connect, attract, and lead young people. The other pitfall of cynical thinking is that you paint a huge population with way too broad a brush. Writing off 70 million people as lazy is ironically a form of laziness in and of itself. For every blue-haired TikToker that makes your eyes roll, there is a quiet, mechanically minded kid who wants to work with their hands. And it's your job to find these youngsters and showcase what an amazing lifestyle and career is possible through trades and construction. Listen, our education system definitely ain't doing it. So like it or not, this responsibility lies squarely with you, the evolving contractor.
So to bridge this gap and debunk some myths, we've brought in Eric Termuende to the studio today. He's a leadership author, a speaker, and an entrepreneur. Eric specializes in working with organizations to build incredible teams and attract this next generation. Now, what's really cool, Eric delivers north of 75 keynote speeches a year to large organizations such as John Deere, Zoom, Amazon, Toyota, and various other trade associations. He's also an author of the book Rethink Work, and he's been unpacking these generational challenges for the last 7 years. Now, in today's episode, we get into a whole bunch of really cool stuff, such as how approaching the conversation in terms of this generation versus that generation is pretty ass backwards. We talk about how to leverage the story that you already have in your business to catch the attention of ambitious, driven, and loyal young people. And we also talk about how this physically demanding nature of your business might actually be its most attractive feature rather than a detractor. So we really enjoyed the conversation today with Eric, and we know that you will too. You're watching Contractor Evolution, where we unpack the systems, tactics, and skills you need to take your fast-growing contracting business to the next level.
You're here to learn what it takes to scale up, work less, and increase profitability. You've come to the right place.
Stay tuned to learn what separates the new breed of contractor from the old school, and welcome to your ultimate guide on the business of contracting.
Hey, before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel. It really helps us produce all this awesome content for you totally for free.
Eric, good to see you again, man. Welcome to the Contractor Evolution Show.
I'm excited to be here. I feel like it's been a long time coming.
Awesome.
I want to start right here, Eric. I want your take on this.
Sure.
There's a message or a thought pattern, an attitude, a mindset, whatever you want to call it, I've heard or seen floating around our industry. And I think most of our listeners probably don't subscribe to this, but they'll know what I'm talking about when I say it, which is a lot of business owners have this attitude, which is like the kids these days thing, right? It's like young people are really lazy, or they're super entitled. They don't want to work. They're not interested in tradesy type jobs. They all just want to be digital marketers. Like whatever it is, the story that they have, they've got some story that they've told themselves about younger generations, Gen Z, millennial. Those are the common scapegoats. So it's like, is this real? Is this generational gap a thing?
Oh man. You're saying that the business owners that are listening don't think kids these days? I can't find a person that doesn't think that right now, and many times myself included. But let's try and debunk this. Let's call it a myth first, which might be a bit of a surprise to anyone who's listening now too. But okay, let's see how we can do this. I'm gonna start with a quote, and I'm gonna see if you can tell me or who it was. The quote, it goes something like this: the children now love luxury. They have bad manners and contempt for authority. They love chatter in the place of exercise. Any guess at whose quote?
I don't know, but it's something old. Napoleon.
Yeah, I'm pretty close to the Socrates quote.
Oh, okay. Even older.
Even older, which makes me think that this whole like disdain or lack of understanding of the next generation isn't new.
It's been going on for a long time.
It's been going on. I mean, I remember reading this Newsweek article that came out in 1993. I didn't read it in 1993, but I remember it came out in 1993. Exactly. I was just, I had my first tooth. Anyways, the whole article was called like the whiny generation, the why me generation. And it was all about baby boomers talking about Gen Xers, right? We had every Time cover for the last 15 years talk about the insanity of the next generation that's coming. And the truth is we all have this sort of lack of understanding of the generation that comes before us. So what is it about kids these days that we really need to understand? Here's my thought, is that it isn't actually a generational conversation that we need to be having, at least not in the way that we've been having it. We were talking before the show today about how our grandparents grew up and the quality of life that they had. Maybe I'll just get you to share what you were sharing with us, because it was like 10 days ago.
I was just talking about this. So 10 days ago, I was cooking dinner with my grandma in Macedonia in Eastern Europe, and I've been very close with her my whole life. I know a lot about their life and their upbringing, but it hit me at a different level this time. As we were talking about like when my mother, so her daughter was younger, let's say 10 years old. So this is in the grand scheme of humanity, this is not very long ago, but the reality of how different their life is staggering, right? She's talking about like, they had a few kids, right? My grandparents, like washing diapers, but this is not like how you have like throwaway ones, like cloth, but you don't just throw them in the washing machine. They literally they go to the well. She goes to the well to get water. My grandpa was a high-level military official, a general, and so he's away at work, and they're setting the fire in the wood burning. She's setting the fire in the wood burning stove, so she has to get up early in the morning to clean the stove before the kids get up to be able to get food and stuff ready for them to get boiling water, to clean diapers, not to mention all the other stuff. Like they had like a small farm to the side, getting food, cooking, the way that you'd wash dishes. It's unbelievable. It was twice a full-time job for a person to take care of kids. And that's, again, my grandma, I'm standing there having and making dinner with her. It's so not long ago, and just the reality of how different life was back then to now, where you can fly here and work on the plane on Wi-Fi as you're flying through the air at 980 kilometers an hour.
Right.
It's insane.
So was this your mom's mom or your dad's mom?
Mom's mom. Yeah.
So what do you think your mom's mom would have said to your mom if she complained about the dishwasher being broken? Or
totally, right? She'd be like, "You have no
garbage.
idea how easy
kids these days
you have a dishwasher that you're able to buy for $10,000 so cheap." And now it's like, wait, it's
totally.
Everything has gotten so much easier to the point. So what we were joking about earlier, where you're like complaining if the Wi-Fi is off as you're sitting in the warm seat at 40,000 feet, flying at 1,000 kilometers an hour through the air. It's insane.
By the way, where are my pretzels?
Yeah, totally.
So let's go back to your question, because here's the thing. This is not a generational conversation in the way that we've been having it, but it is a generational conversation. So I'm gonna run a theory by you,
okay?
And we'll process this for a second, but it'll be fun at the same time. There's a theory by a gentleman named Buckminster Fuller, and he came up with this thought that he called the knowledge doubling curve. That basically said before the year 1900, the amount of information that we had access to, not like you and I, but as a society had access to, doubled every 100 years.
Right.
So from 1700 to 1800, the amount of information that we had access to doubled. From 1800 to 1900, it doubled again. But there's an interesting sort of inflection point at the year 1900 where the amount of information that we had access to started to double at a halved rate. Okay.
So every 50 years?
Yeah, exactly. But it doubled again at 1950. So from 1950 to 1975, it doubled again. From 75 to 83, it doubled again, to the point where, and we've heard it before, the first industrial revolution, we're talking like the steam engine. Yeah. Second, the assembly line. Third, early computing and robotics. Fourth, now what the World Economic Forum says we're going through right now is this like AI age, where we're not moving like steps or leaps forward. It's this exponential jump.
So fast.
Right? And we talked about this before. This year, 76 more times information exists on the internet than did just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So the age that we're living in is wildly different. So what's happened in this knowledge doubling curve is that the amount of information is doubling so quickly that IBM actually predicted last year that the amount of information that we have access to now is doubling every 12 to 13 hours.
Right.
Everything we know about medicine, everything we know about space, everything we know about, biology and everything else is doubling at a rate that we've never seen before. So maybe I'll ask you this sort of final question as we sort of bring it home. When you were growing up in the back of the car,
Yeah.
What did you do to keep yourself busy? You're
we
5 years old or whatever it might have
We
been.
listened to Michael Jackson's greatest hits, and I played
On what?
Game Boy Color. Yeah, on CD-ROM.
On CD-ROM, maybe,
Yeah.
or tape, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so
totally.
I remember I had one of the first Game Boys too, Game Boy Color. And then my brother, lucky guy, he had the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. And then he had the PlayStation PSP,
Yeah,
right?
huge.
How cool was that?
Yeah.
Then, my younger cousin had the Caravan with the fold-down DVD
I
screen.
remember that.
Game changing.
Yeah.
From there, we didn't even need that anymore. We just put the screens on the back of the headrest, which, we thought was only for the Hummer H2 at the time.
Rich
but now all of a
kids.
sudden, yeah, rich kids, kids these days. And then from there, all of a sudden it was right back to our phones and our screens. And now we can do 5G LTE. We can play, someone driving down the Trans-Canada Highway going 120 kilometers an hour. We can play the Mario Kart real time. Before our Game Boy Colors and our books and our CDs, the backseat of the car didn't look all that much different. It was I Spy, books, singing with our parents or whoever's in the front of the car, and then fighting with our siblings if we had them.
Yeah, since the invention of the
Since
car.
the invention
to
of the
that,
car,
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When we talk about kids these days, we're actually talking about something different. We're talking about this new era of individual that is growing up in a world that is substantially different than the world that our parents or grandparents grew up in. So maybe I'll ask you this question. If you were to see that Woodstock generation be like a Gen Z today, do you think their wants, needs, demands, and asks would be any different than the kids that are coming up today
No,
would be?
they'd be
a
just as
chance.
entitled. They'd be just
They'd be
as lazy.
as everything else
they'd be
because
just
this
as
isn't a
whatever.
generational conversation. This is an advancement of information and an advancement of society conversation. We're seeing it now in every aspect.
When people are doing this trope, the kids these days bit, what they're actually saying is the environment that kids were raised in has changed, and that may have negative effects. But the kid is the kid through time. That's pretty consistent. There's nothing wrong with the actual dates that these children were born in.
Sure.
It's the environment, it's the technological advancement, it's the access to information,
That's right.
it's the wealth, the luxury, it's social media, it's all these things.
Can we
That's
call it a
what's-
little bit of jealousy? Because you can't tell me that your grandma wasn't going to be a little bit jealous of your mom when she got, a dishwasher and she got central heat in the house.
I wonder if that's what it is.
I don't know. I don't want to call it blanket jealousy, but there's going to be some elements where, our parents or whoever it might be, or maybe the business owners that are listening, they're thinking are you kidding me? I slaved so hard, so many long days to get to where I am today. And look, here's what I want to say. I don't want to discount any of the hard work that's been put in. Nor do I want to discount or suggest that someone who's just starting their career doesn't need to put in the long, hard hours too. It's just that the expectation of what's possible, primarily due to the accessibility of information, it starts to paint a different picture. One last example. When I look at how my parents, would have got their first jobs, maybe it was at the community center, maybe it was at the high school, maybe it was at the
Classified
university.
ads.
Classified. They literally pulled
Pull
it off
it
a
off the-
bulletin board.
yeah.
Are you kidding me? The two of us could go on right now on Monster, Indeed, on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We could have a job in Sweden by the end of the month, having never been there before. No problem. Here's the problem. We get to Sweden and we realize that, hold on, not only is this job not a good fit, I don't even like Sweden.
Right.
Yeah.
Which then paints a bigger picture because now companies are fighting for all this talent that they don't even know that they want because the person that's applying doesn't know if that's the job that they want either. And so there's this entire mismatch of people because we've set the bar way too high. We've painted this beautiful picture about how awesome it is to work at our place of work or, our job site or whatever it might be. And this person only sees the perks and the benefits. And then when they get there, man, it's almost like going to your favorite steak restaurant and realizing that the steak's cold when you get it. Like you just had this beautiful vision in your mind, and all of a sudden it's just disappointment when it gets there.
The case could be made though, like here's what I think someone listening might say. They go, yeah, I hear you. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with kids these days, but listen, you just said it yourself. Things are changing much faster. This like duplication of information thing is a real thing, and therefore it's different. The gap is wider. And I know that like, you know, my grandparents were complaining about kids these days, but I swear to God, it's different these days. There's social media, there's all these other like forces that are making it worse. And so like, what would you say to someone who maybe has that attitude, having heard what we just said?
Well, I mean, the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that you know, we've heard it before. The future of work is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. You know, we have this accessibility to technology. We have many people that can work remotely, work from home, work via Zoom, work with still maybe a white collar on and never get out of bed.
Right.
And then you've got some traditional job sites that maybe technology hasn't impacted all that much. Maybe from like the marketing, maybe from the development and how we're getting new clients. Sure, technology might be used in that case quite a bit. But what I'm trying to say here is that we can't blanket generalize a generation. I mean, chances are you don't want that Gen Z or millennial who's making TikTok videos and dancing, you know, in front of the mirror.
You don't want
They're
them
not
anyway.
what your business is
You
missing.
probably don't
Yeah.
want them.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
You probably don't want them.
If your roofing companies are not successful,
Yeah.
it's not because you've not hired the TikToker.
No, and that's the thing is we like to think that you know, these millennials or these Gen Zs are all one person. You know, I could ask the two of you what your favorite genre of music is. You'd probably give me something different. Your favorite style of movie, you'd give me something different. Your favorite or your dream vacation, you'd give me something different. I could ask you what your favorite kind of coffee is, and when you had it last, you tell me, and I tell you in return, I haven't had a cup of coffee in my entire life.
Yeah.
You know, all this to say that we, you know, if we look at, maybe I'll ask you, between which years were millennials born? Just give me like a rough range.
It's like 1988 to like 2002.
Okay.
It's like late 70s or like 1980.
25 to 40 right now.
Yeah, right. So you said 88, you said late 70s. Now, even there,
It's
we've
a
got a
huge
10-year
gap, Benji.
discrepancy.
Come on, man.
Yeah. But see, here's my point. This is not to point fingers at either of you. What I'm trying to say is we love to generalize and label a generation. We
Right.
can't even
It's
define
easy.
them. We
It's
can't
easy.
even define
Yeah.
them. And look, if we look at the research that I've been looking at, anything from like PwC to the census to like, you know, to the labor statistics, you know, we can get anywhere from 1977 to 2004.
Everyone says something different.
Everyone says something different, and yet they all describe this generation to be the exact same. Some of them are paying off their student loans, and others are preparing for their kids' student loans.
Right.
You know, it's so funny how we love to label and generalize this generation. We can't even define. So if we really want to attract this generation, this next generation, stop trying to attract a generation and start trying to attract an individual. An individual that wants the lifestyle that you've got, that your people have got, and ultimately then too is bigger than just what happens from like 9 to 5 or maybe 7 to 3. It's like the lifestyle that they want to live. Do you want to be home for dinner? Do you want to be working weekends? Do you want to have some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor where you can build a team? Like, these are the stories that we don't hear about in the industry because we're trying to think like, how can we Instagram this?
Yeah.
Maybe the point is you don't, and that's probably why people want to work there in the first place.
I think what I find really fascinating is when you know, I hear this at conferences, you see it in webinar rooms, we'll overhear it at some of our group calls in Breakthrough Academy. Like, this conversation does come up. But I have to say, like, when you peel back the layers of the businesses, of the people who are saying this, like who lean on this, this talking point a lot, what you'll see is the generational thing is actually more of a scapegoat to like excuse really lousy employer brand, not a very good value proposition to the employee, not a super dynamic culture, not a ton of growth opportunities. And it's like, I hate to single out some individuals, but there are people who just literally have like a shitty deal that they're offering young people. And then when they don't apply, they go like, whoa, young, like these kids these days, they don't want to work. And it's like, yeah, no, they just found something better somewhere else.
What you're
They can
selling
make-
is not
what they're selling
is
what
not
you-
very good. Yeah.
What you're selling is not
Totally.
what they want.
So Eric, with this problem that still remains then, so in contracting, in trades, and there are a bunch of other similar industries where there is a reality that the work, like you do have to show up, you have to do the thing,
No
and
doubt.
it's not always easy, and sometimes it's raining, and sometimes it's cold, and all this kind of stuff. And on average, for most, they cannot bring young people in fast enough. So how do we solve for that, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is that everything that you said obviously is very true. But if I were to go to like the careers or the About Us page, it's often very sunny, and nobody's got their hands dirty. Everyone's got this nice pressed shirt on.
Right.
So I just think that often the thing that we're selling and the thing that we're providing are very different. It's like ordering a size 12 shoe and realize a size 8 comes, and you're wondering, well, this isn't exactly what I was signed up for.
You see that on average in a lot of companies?
But it's not just in construction and trades. It's across the board. I mean, we'll see this in every industry, in every sector, every size, no matter what. And I think what we're realizing is that we're starting to fail to understand what is a best place to work. So I'll dive into this for a second.
Let's unpack that.
Fortune magazine put out their best. Okay, let's use a British Columbia example while we're here. Can you name 2 of the top, let's just say 10 places to work, large companies to work for in British Columbia?
Lululemon,
ODE Brands,
Arc'teryx.
Mm-hmm. Also up there is Ledcor. Also up there is TELUS. Also up there is Finning. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, all these are great companies. All these are great companies, no doubt. But would somebody that works at Ledcor want to work at Lululemon?
No.
Not necessarily.
Right.
Would somebody that
And
works at
vice versa.
TELUS want to work at Finning?
Yeah.
Would somebody at Finning want to work at TELUS?
That's a
No,
really good
absolutely
point.
not. See, here's the thing: is we're trying to say like, oh, we've got the best place to work. Here's my question: for who?
For who? Right.
And the only answer to that question, if we really want to understand who it's for, is to ask the people that are already working for us. What is the life that you like to live? How do we support that for you? And how can we actually showcase you as an A player on this team to then attract people who are like you, who want to live a similar lifestyle that you do, and ultimately understand and work sort of the similar hours that you might
So
do.
is this a newer thing where it's almost like an employer's responsibility to help create a lifestyle for the people that work there, or was that always like that?
I just think, again, when we go back to how much information is accessible right now, we can see more of it. I don't think it's a responsibility for an employer to then create this like almost like avatar of the perfect employer. What'll happen is like these people will emerge and then end up staying with you longer because they fit and they enjoy the experience more. Where I think the missed opportunity is that we're not giving... Let me rephrase. It's not that we're not giving these people the tools. It's that we're not showcasing these people enough to other people who are like them when we're trying to build a company. Let's be very clear. We often think that the taller the stack of the resumes, the better chance we have of hiring great talent.
It's not always true, though.
In fact, it's very much the opposite. Chances are, if you have a stack of resumes this high, you've done a very poor job at actually articulating the experience of what people are going to live on the job. So instead of having 150 resumes, I'd rather see 15, because then 135 people vetted themselves out of the job, saved you and the people who are applying a lot of time because they realized it's not for them in the first place, and now they can get a better understanding of what it's like not just to work wherever you're working, but live the life that your people are living too.
So it sounds like you're a big fan of having a lot of clarity and a lot of definition around who am I as an employer and as a company, and what do we offer our people. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would love to see, like on average, a day in the life of an average employee, from the time that they wake up to like, how many nails they hammered, how many holes they dug, how many meetings they had, how many emails they wrote, how many phone calls they were on, what time they got home from work, because that's the life that they're ultimately going to live. Right? That, we like to think that this is the job is an isolated event, an isolated experience. Let me offer this. We don't sign up for jobs anymore. We sign up for lifestyles. And the job that we live dictates the lifestyle that we will ultimately lead.
That's really interesting. So how do you you think about most of our listeners are going to they're running small to medium sized construction and trades businesses. These are renovators, painters, landscapers, roofers. They're doing $1 million a year to $10 million a year as a range. Their employees are going to be like laborers, carpenters, skilled carpenters. They'd be like technicians. There'd be ticketed guys and girls of different types. You'd have project managers. You'd have production managers, operations managers. You might, in some businesses, you have like an estimation team or a sales team. So it's these types of roles, and these are like physically demanding roles. These are you're geographically pinned. You're not going to be a remote worker. Like, let's be real. You need to hire like someone to build homes for your company. It's like you can't promise them like, oh, like go do like 3 months in Thailand and work from there. It's like that's not part of the deal. And I think that's what a lot of our listeners, they're challenged by that. They're like, well, there's all this cool stuff that all these other people are doing. Like, I don't know if this is that cool. They feel almost insecure about what they're offering. But what I know to be true, because we work with these people, is that there's an unbelievable lifestyle to be had in this world, like better than what a lot of other people have, way better. So how would a listener who runs a business right now go about showcasing not just the role, but the lifestyle that they have and the lifestyle that they've created for their team? Like, what should they actually go and do?
Well, I'd probably go back about 15 seconds and really hone in on better first. Because, you could say live a better life or have a better lifestyle. I think that therein lies the problem in this entire conversation, is that we think there is a universal better. And that whole like sort of head-butting sort of we're better than you, you're better than me is where all of this is really originating from. I mean, look, I grew up in Cranbrook, British Columbia, small town, 22,000 people in the very southeast corner of British Columbia. I got friends here on the 34th story of some condo building downtown thinking like, how did you grow up there?
Yeah.
And then I get people in Cranbrook are thinking like, are you kidding me? What are you doing in this city? How do you even get a good night's sleep?
I felt that stark difference between people. Yeah.
And so to define better than as a universal better is a miss.
You're saying everyone's different with different needs and wants and desires.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about this before that, there are two Canadas, there are two Americas, and two might even be an understatement.
Yeah.
There are more than two Americas.
Right. And so to suggest that one is better than the other really sort of puts you as the one dictating what it means to be better. Chances are that really lacks empathy and understanding the people that are living there and what they define to be better is. And so here's the thing. Growing up in Cranbrook, BC, the best part about Cranbrook is that it's not Calgary and it's not Vancouver. I mean, I'm 10 minutes away from a lake. I'm hiking in the morning. I'm doing everything outside. Hunting and fishing, which we talked about, is like the easiest two tasks on the planet. And just having as much fun as possible. Now here, I go up to Grouse Mountain on January 15th. I'm waiting 90 minutes to get on the chair for the first time. Meanwhile, it's night skiing, so I got a total of 3 runs and I've spent $75.
Yeah.
Now I'll go in and get a hot chocolate for 10 more.
Forget it.
No way. Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's go back to your question. How do we start to tell these stories? Is that we get into something bigger than just what happens on the job site. Because yes, the job site's going to be important. It's going to be demanding. But what I want to understand is what's that community that we're going to be a part of? What's that lifestyle that we're going to get to live? And then how do we get to connect with people who share similar values, similar interests, so that we can build a life with them too?
Interesting. We've had that's one thing we've been encouraging a lot of our members to do. We've talked about this on other episodes, is build a join our team page, build a careers page, and on it house a really nice video that showcases the team, the environment, the job sites, the commute, tell the story of what it's like to work for you.
But don't wait for the sunny days to shoot the stuff too.
And
don't wait for people to just get out of the shower before you turn the camera on, because the chances are people are happiest when they've got paint on their clothes, when they've got a stripe down their nose, when they just finished this wall and they can go back and look at what they've done. I think that's the story that's being missed, because even when you do over manufacture and over polish these videos, you're turning people away who want the experience that these people are actually having that you're failing to tell.
Interesting.
Just saying, to be authentic about who you are when you
talk about authenticity all the time, and we still fail to miss it. I mean, it's just
totally. I guess the first step in all of this is as an organization, as a leader even, and as a brand, you first have to kind of understand who you are.
Oh man,
which is a whole topic.
Yeah, but especially as a smaller organization, you're just talking that $1 to $10 million entrepreneur. Double down on what is the life that I want to live right now, because we talk about presenteeism or even absenteeism at the board meeting or something like that. Chances are the reason why that entrepreneur who's sitting at the table, who's not present and dealing with their people right now, is probably because they've got tasks on their mind that they didn't sign up to really do when they got into the business in the first place. And so really understanding that, can we double down on the things that we like to do, outsource the things that we don't, and build a team of people who are complementary in their skill set but aligned in their way of work. And I think that's going to be ultimately sort of like that secret sauce.
Yeah. Very interesting. What is your advice on when an entrepreneur is really trying to figure out like as a brand, and especially as an employer brand, who are we in terms of like our values, and what is our company culture? I think a lot of people really oversimplify that. Like we are, we work hard and we do the right thing,
Right,
and we,
right.
you know what I mean? Like
All too well.
Tell me a bit about
And
that.
it's even worse, when you get into like the corporate side of
I
things
bet.
too. We value integrity and innovation
It's just
and
all bullshit.
honor and respect.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It's like it's well intended.
Yeah.
Right? And it's supposed to be unifying. The problem though is that the English language, especially in this like Instagram economy, is that I looked at someone's post this morning and she was at a coffee shop and had this like banana bread and tea. And she's like, this is a life-changing, phenomenal piece of banana bread. Like, it's a miracle that this thing even landed on my plate. And I look at words like that to describe breakfast.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, what happens when your friend gets like pregnant after she was told that there was no way that she could get
Right.
pregnant? Like, what words
do you
do we
use?
use to describe something that is actually miraculous
So true.
and is actually life-changing
Yeah.
and is actually,
So
incredible?
saying words have become watered down. in their
Inflated.
lives.
Yeah, they're
words,
like
words just don't mean anything anymore,
No.
and that's why I've got a theory that I've never said publicly before. But that's why people, when they like get engaged or something now, will say something like "no big deal," but just got engaged
Yeah.
because like there are no other words that they can use. Chances are, if you look lower in that feed, they've used miraculous and incredible to describe their banana bread that morning, so they don't have any words to use left. So they use things like "no big deal," which takes us back to the values and things like that. So here's what I would recommend. Instead of looking at like mission, vision, values, which I think if they're done properly can still be very, very valuable. Instead, what I would like to understand are like, what are habits and behaviors and actions, right? So what are the actual things that we do every day that either support the values or negate the values? Like if we say that we if we say that we value respect to the customer, what I would love to see is like, instead of like respect the customer, or in addition to, maybe even more importantly, in addition to value the customer, just say like, did we follow up after the call to say thank you? Did we do this next thing and send them like some sort of branded piece of swag to show that we appreciated the work that we just did with them? Like, and then now we can start to check off these actions.
We're actually doing the action
We're actually
that
doing
supports
these
it,
things
yeah.
because here's the thing: in many cases, we don't even know what the actions are. Like we value innovation.
It's just a $5
What-
word that
what's
goes on the wall.
innovation?
Yeah, no, I know. You can't even define it. But if you had innovation and then a bullet point, like here are a bunch of examples
Right.
of what innovation.
We try 3 new things every day.
boom.
Okay, so now on Friday, what are the 15 new things that we tried this week? And then we can go back and we can measure against our values.
Yeah.
Now we can actually see measurable improvements, and we can unify people on those values that we put out there in the first place to ensure that we're all aligned and still marching to the same beat of the drum.
Yeah.
I do think that there's something to be said for values are important. Try to make them not just like a fancy $5 word, but make it a phrase. And then if you can actually go the next step, do it like semicolon. And here's what we mean by that.
Totally.
Like give it a paragraph if
Yeah.
you need to, but really speaking concrete language. Provide examples. Provide practical, actionable steps that one could take to live out those values. Because what ends up happening without that is it really is just a poster on the wall.
Sure.
And you walk by it and people go, yeah, like we're really big on integrity here. And then you'd ask someone to define it and they wouldn't know how.
That's a tough one, even as
Yeah.
it is. But look, in construction or in trades, we see safety all the time as a value. I mean, you got a problem if it's not a value, first of all. But secondary, like, are we talking physical safety? Are we talking emotional safety?
100%.
Are we talking psychological safety?
Right.
Yeah.
And even within those different categories of safety, how are we exemplifying what that looks
Right.
and feels like on a daily basis?
Totally.
Chances are we
100%.
don't even get there.
100%. I want to just come back to this whole recruiting conversation
Sure.
and attracting young people. So, you talked a bit about this balance of needing to sell a position and like the brand and marketing that exists within this, and really should exist within it to some degree. How do we make something sound cool but also be transparent about what the reality of the work is? Because you said that you see in the general business landscape that there is quite a disconnect between what employers are selling and the reality of how well, or rather not well, they've created that work environment. So what's your balance? Like, how do you recommend that employers go about this delicate balance?
Well, I mean, first you have to get the attention of the individual, and I think we can do that in the ways that we discussed, talking about a day in the life of, talking about sort of those actions. But I think prior to taking the job, the onus is on the employer to then have an employee take that person for lunch, take them for coffee, have them job shadow for a day. Maybe it's a paid day. Maybe it's $200.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, that is the best $200 you'll ever spend if you realize
Come
that
see
person's
the reality
either a
of
great
this.
place to work or not.
Before you really invest.
Invest.
And then
it's
to you.
mutual.
And then to you.
Of course. Look, the biggest thing that I think is missed in the working world right now is that we don't spend enough time having the team interview with the team. Like it's a recruiter who's never worked a day in the life of the job ever, trying to figure out if this person's going to be a good fit or not.
It's a tall order.
It's a very tall order, especially when you don't know the job. And you can get the rubber stamp of the entrepreneur or the business owner and say, yes, that's great. You can be qualified. You can have the skills. You can have the physical ability. You can do all these things. That's great. Here's what I would understand. Here's what I want to understand. I'd want that individual to then go into a meeting with the person they're going to be spending 8 hours a day with, hauling drywall around or grabbing paint for, or whatever the situation is. And just see, do these two get along? Do these four get along? And then I would also plant the prospective employee with questions like, what do you do on the weekends? Tell me what was your, do you get injured on the job? Are you stiff and sore? What does an average day actually look like? Are you married? Do you have kids? When's the last time you left the city or the state or the province or the country?
Yeah.
If it's a holiday, where do you like to go? And then you get to see oh man, I didn't think it, but I actually want a lot of those things too.
Right.
Or you say, I don't at all, and thinking, thank goodness this is great for both of us. One of the best places to work in in the corporate world is Zappos in Las Vegas. Zappos is an online shoe retailer, and they're notorious for this culture that is unlike anything else. You go in there and there's maracas and tambourines and ferns and streamers, and all the walls are painted bright rainbow colors, and they're all about fun and play. And I tell you, I saw this video of Zappos, and it's supposed to be this, appealing to, this, us, avocado loving millennials, right? It's supposed to be a dream come true. I looked at that thing, I was like, I couldn't spend 10 minutes in there. No way. But because Zappos did such a good job at painting what it's like to work inside Zappos, they've got a lineup around the block. And they have for the last 15 years of people that want to work there.
And there's a specific type of person.
They're not trying to attract me. No.
Yeah, but there is
That's right.
a type of person. Yeah. So you're saying everybody's different. And, to your point, Benji, we don't just use broad brushstrokes to paint this is better, right? Or this is what this whole generation is like or isn't like, or this is what is good or isn't good. Everyone is an individual.
Here's the thing. I'll sort of marry the two questions around values and this recruiting question too, because, you said, what should companies do on that value side of things? If I were to think critically for a second, I couldn't. I've never done a values exercise personally. I don't know if you guys have, but I don't know what my values are. So I don't know if they align with the company's values. I mean, safety sounds cool. Innovation sounds neat. Integrity, I think I have that. Respect, communication, yeah. I mean, who doesn't think they're those things, right? On the flip side, though, and I'm able to have a conversation with somebody that's working there and really understand what they do, how they like to approach their job, only then will I be able to think oh, actually, yeah, that's what they mean when they say these values. And that's how this shows up. And that's the life. Look, you ask a 16, 17, 20-year-old what they want to be and what they want to do when they grow up. Man, I'm still trying to figure out the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And so for anyone to have this well-defined, polished answer of here's who I want to be when I grow up, I mean, either A, they're really fortunate and have a really great deal of understanding of themselves, or B, they're making it up like the rest of us are.
Yeah.
And so only if we're exposed to the individuals that we can look up to and admire and really aspire to be, only then can we think oh, maybe this is actually going to be a great opportunity for me.
Yeah. So key point is in the recruiting environment, you want to really expose people as much as you can to the actual workings of the organization, very objectively, as you say,
Totally.
not just on a sunny day. And if you're sitting here thinking, wow, I really wouldn't want to do that. You should probably rethink the operational aspect of your business. Right?
Look, I mean, from a physical standpoint, that stuff is going to be there like 3 generations ago and 3 generations into the future. I think what you're talking about, though, too, is more like leadership qualities and that psychological safety side of things. And like, are we giving the support to the individuals that allow them to feel like they can grow and develop in this role? That they feel like they matter, that they feel that they're making a difference? Because ultimately, when we look at leadership across the board right now, that's where work is changing most. I mean, look, we talk about the future of work all the time. I don't think the future of work is about the task or the job at all. You know, I had a friend that just moved from an accountant at a heavy machinery company to an accountant at like one of the big 4. Her job didn't change, but the lifestyle totally changed. And what she moved for was better leadership, not a better task.
Yeah.
And so the differentiator in this case, too, even from companies within the sector or within the industry, is going to be leadership and not the job itself.
I think that's a big thing that's missing in the recruiting message for a lot of our members. And it's something that they already have that's not being showcased well enough, which is this is a small to medium sized business. I am here in the business almost every day. I will, like, you know, I'm not going to be right next to you every day you work, but I am a phone call away or a text message away. I'm here to mentor you. I'm here to work closely with you. There's such a, I heard you use this word earlier, like this absenteeism in a lot of businesses where you start and you go through your onboarding period, and 3 weeks later, you're kind of just like sitting there figuring it out yourself. And I think that the businesses that we work with are of a size and of a nature where there's absolutely an opportunity to be present, to be hyper engaged. And it might surprise a lot of our listeners how much young people, to use a blanket statement again, but how much young people are looking for that, how much that is actually missing in their lives.
Well, sorry, really quick, Eric, would you agree, like, is this a true fact that the expectation on average people, what kind of expectation they have around the quality of their work, their employer and their leader is increasing? Is that happening with social media and the amount of transparency that is around? Like, do they expect more than they used to because they see what awesome looks like all around them? Now, whether it's real or not is a whole other conversation, but is there an increase in expectations that young people have?
The answer I'm going to give you is like a gut answer, not a research-backed answer, because I don't have the research on that. What I will say, though, is that when you get every industry and every sector putting out their best 2% in that ad,
which is what's happening,
then what's happening is that expectations across the board are being blown out of proportion completely.
Yeah.
Not only that, but we do that on our Instagram filters and everything else. So we see that from like person to person too. What I do think is happening, though, is that individuals are craving attention more and more because they're getting less and less of it. On average, we're checking our phones 82 times a day. We're spending 3.5 to 4.5 hours a day in front of our cell phones.
Yep.
In many cases, we're spending 10 or 11 hours a day in front of a screen in general. Like, the numbers are absolutely staggering. And you might be thinking, well, not in construction. Fucking great. Tell that story.
Right.
Because so many people are looking for that connection. They're looking to matter. They're looking to, actually see the work that they're doing. They're looking to feel these things that they're not able to feel in any other sector or industry. And so we often think that the things that, are going to detract people from the industry, I want to flip that and say maybe that's exactly what they're looking for.
I think that it is.
I think that it is. And it's not everyone. Maybe it's 5% of the population.
But those
it's
are the ones
5%
you're
of the
looking
population.
for.
That's still
plenty.
too many.
That's plenty. Yeah, totally.
And you might think that like the industry has a talent shortage. Well, your company doesn't have to.
Right.
Look, we've got a talent shortage across both Canada and the United States right now.
In every sector.
In every sector, but that doesn't mean that every company has a talent shortage.
Yeah, because this is a huge economy. You can't just also
economy.
paint it with broad brushstrokes. Within that, there are serious winners and real losers, and it's like, how good of a job can you do in there? But anyway, so back to the leadership element. I think at some level, expectations are high because they see the best of the best on social media everywhere. But Benji, sorry, you were asking about like expectations on leadership here.
Well, I was asking actually, it was more of a statement. I think that there's an opportunity to talk about your present leadership as a feature and a benefit for the potential people.
If you are a present leader.
If you are indeed that, and I think that a lot of our listeners are. So that should be a part of what you're trying to communicate.
I could also see, though, people listening and just kind of like rolling their eyes like, great, I have to hold hands with these kids and tell them they're doing great.
That's not what we're saying.
I know that's not what you're saying, and I just don't want to make sure that that's not what's being heard. But if you want like a quick like framework, here's something that I would invite you to consider. Like every week, formally or informally, just ask the team 3 questions. Number 1, what should we start doing? Number 2, what should we stop doing? And number 3, what should we continue doing? See, here's what happens when we create this space, and we're talking like 15 minutes, not like a half day or anything like that. Just simple questions. What happens is we talk about innovation, we talk about psychological safety. When we put this meeting in place, it happens no matter what, every week, 30 minutes. Then what happens is we create a safe space for people to share any idea that they have about anything. Yeah. Could be about marketing, could be about onboarding, could be about how we're doing some sort of project, could be about a new best practice that we've heard. But when we ask what we should start, stop, and continue doing, we create space for new ideas. We get rid of old practices that might not serve us right now. And finally, when we ask what we can continue doing, we reinforce and revalidate some of the things that are happening and going that are working really well. The most important part of this exercise, though, is not even the ideas that come from it. It's the fact that you're creating this space where people can share ideas.
Totally.
And what's going to happen on a weekly basis is that, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, maybe you go around the table and maybe someone says, I don't really have anything this week. But that's great, because when they do, they're not going to be afraid. The door's open. Yeah. The amount of times where I've had somebody come up to me and said, yeah, you know what, I heard that. And just last week, I wrote up this awesome 3-paragraph email. I got my partner to edit it, spell check it for me. It was so great. You know what I did right before I pressed send? Select all and deleted the whole thing. My boss doesn't have time. Might think this is a stupid idea. I do have a promotion coming up in 6 months, and I'm just not going to do it at all. Here's the question I have for anyone who's listening today. Where would you be right now if you heard and understood every single idea that every one of your people had? Now, to be very clear, I don't mean that you've run with it or that you've tried everything, but if you at least heard it. And I'm not even talking about where you'd be in terms of an advancement stage. Where would your people be in terms of like how psychologically safe they'd feel and relaxed they'd feel and how fewer things they'd have on their shoulders or in the back of their mind? There'd just be so much more openness to these ideas that come up that, man, I would just be, and I'm not talking construction specifically, I'm talking like in any industry. Imagine where we'd be if everyone could share their ideas without fear of repercussion. Yeah. It'd be pretty incredible.
Awesome. Yeah. And the note on the presence of leadership, like it takes a present leader, whether you're going to roll with any of these ideas or not, it still takes a present leader to actually sit down and listen and make someone feel heard and understood.
Yeah. And to be clear, I think the fastest way to speed up human connection is to slow down, really. We've always got things that we could be doing, but when we take the time to have these conversations and really foster a deeper sense of connection across the team, that it doesn't take a long meeting or for them to happen like 4 times a day to build a team that trusts each other, that knows that everyone has each other's backs. In fact, a study out of the NBA not too long ago showed that in like the Steve Nash era, showed that that there was a correlation between the number of like taps, like ass taps, shoulder taps, back taps, and how well the team was doing. Not because like the physical touch symbolized we have your back. Right. And so again, we don't need to do like half-day, full-day workshops every month to make sure that we're all holding hands and making sure that everyone's happy and healthy. It's just like, hey, you okay? You good? Just these constant, reaffirm, just make sure everything's good. You just take the time to be present just for that second to say, hey, I'm here for you. And it'll be amazing what happens next.
It's a really great point, right? Because I think there's a reluctance to lean into this because they have this vision where it's like, oh, we're all going to be like in a circle singing Kumbaya, and we're all going to take 2 days off a week for personal days and personal growth, and like none of the projects are going to get finished. It's like, that is not what we're saying.
No.
Like you can be a present leadership. You can care deeply about your people. You can listen to them. And you can do that in your own style, and it can be as tradesy, as sporty. It can be as you can define it however you want, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and be like, well, that doesn't work for construction and trades. That might be great for tech and those other businesses, but we can't.
And that's
do that
why
here.
I wanted to really ensure that we're not talking about kumbaya sessions here. No, we're just talking about just check-ins.
Yeah, I want to come back to one powerful thing you said just a second ago, which is this: you believe the best way to go fast is to slow down and be present. I think a lot of entrepreneurs in a lot of industries, but especially in contracting, feel like a really big pull because of the operational complexity of the business. You need to bring in leads. There's so much going on in estimating and like the quoting and selling side of the business, you're hiring staff, you're training them, the operational complexities of running many crews at a time with many job sites at a time, the administrative, and I could go on and on. But the point is there's so much on the mind, right? And there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this space that struggle with this element of just feeling very distracted. There's like mentally you have so many things to worry about and so many places to be. What are your thoughts on that from a leadership perspective, especially of this young generation that it does expect a lot of leaders? What do entrepreneurs need to be mindful of in context of what you say, which is this slowing down to actually be able to go fast?
What I'm talking about when I say slowing down is more on the relationship and the connection building with the team. Like I can recognize we're all going to be distracted and have, so many things going on at the same time that speed is going to be really important. The one thing that I've learned now is that, when we talk about innovation and we talk about problem solving, what I found is that innovation itself is a slow process. And by that, I mean, we have to create the time to think and we have to create the space to be able to breathe. Then the follow-up, though, the learning, the development, the growth, the pivoting, that all is like lightning fast.
Right.
Because we can't dwell on things. We have to learn from it. We have to adjust very quickly and we have to keep going. But I would say even on a personal level, the nights that I get a good sleep, the nights where I have like a morning where I can have 30 minutes before I get started. And look, I don't mean that this is at 9 a.m. I mean, it might still be at 5:30 or 6, But the more time I can take to intentionally slow down, the better I'll be throughout the day. I mean, look, the analogy is that if you go to the gym 8 days in a row, you're going to wear your body down. You're going to be hurt. You're not going to be able to go on the 9th. But if you go for 3 days, work out different areas of the body, take a day off, and then go back, I mean, that's when you're not only going to not get sick or not get hurt, but you'll build stronger and you'll be end up being better at the end of the month.
Yeah. So as a leader, that to be able to slow down with your people and give the space needed to create connections and allow time to think and process through things is important. Yeah, absolutely. On the note of leadership, just what are your thoughts on this, like leading over the long term, right? So when we're looking at the future of work, how do we keep our young employees engaged from a leadership perspective in over the long haul?
Involve them, get them to be part of the problem solving. I mean, look, so many times I've heard and seen companies do like trivia nights or, wine tasting or, whatever it might be, some sort of like team development.
Off the side, yeah.
Yeah, which look, I'm not saying that that's not important. There's a time and a place for everything. But if you really want people to feel like they matter, if you really want them to feel important, to say, hey, look, here's the situation. We're up against 4 other companies on this, and we need some sort of differentiator, something that gets us to stand out from the other 3. What do you guys think? Can you imagine just like being a young employee where your boss comes and asks you like, we got a big deal on the line. I want
that's
your
the company
opinion.
culture event.
Oh man.
At the bar.
It's true. Yeah. But like, here's the thing. When you start, the Eleanor Roosevelt quote is this: small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas.
Right.
And I found that when I had a personal backpacking trip in Australia, when I dropped out of school for a year, way back when, I found that I built so many connections with so many friends so fast. Why? Well, because we didn't have any people in common because we came from different parts of the world. We didn't have any events in common because we just met 5 minutes ago. And the same idea we're trying to solve is like, how do we get from A to B as cheap as possible while having as much fun as we possibly can? What happens is we immediately start discussing ideas and start building and creating together. So you want to lead in the long term, involve people in that process. And again, this isn't about going with the idea that the 22-year-old brings to the table. It's about involving them in that process. And then look, if you don't go with that idea and you tell them why and they get to learn from it, man, what happens when they ask for that idea again? They're going to come with a different perspective.
That example of the Australia trip is interesting because that's the one commonality you have with these other people. Like that's what you have in common is that you're there and you're trying to have a good time on a trip. It's a similar idea, I think, like with a team. The thing that you have in common with your friends that you work in the construction company with is that
Is the
job,
work.
not the cab
the
sauv
work. Right.
or the Riesling that
that's-
you're wine tasting. Like we don't work on the wine.
Right.
Like our common connection is on the work at hand.
This is why it's so obvious that we miss it, where it's we'll go and do a culture event, which is wing nights, and it's so Charlie, I hear you're really into I'm really here. You're into Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Okay, let's talk. So tell me
What
about
generation are you talking
Yeah, no,
about?
you know what I'm saying. You,
Yeah.
you try to
You're
build
trying to
rapport
manufacture it.
Yeah.
with
But
this
it's manufactured.
really bizarre way.
You start complaining about the Canucks and
Totally, and you go to this really generic conversation.
Yeah.
Nobody really
But you
wants
do
to
have something in
That's what
common.
I'm saying.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's hey man, we
Yeah.
have we do have this problem with this customer. This job is lagging. What do you think is going on? And then just sit back and listen. They may have a great idea.
Yeah.
They may have an idea that's totally shit. But the point is, you make them feel heard. You give them your attention. You listen. And even if they shoot 1 for 10,
Sure.
it's still that
Isn't
is
that
where the
open to
bonding
connection?
is.
Isn't that the
100%.
entire VC philosophy? If we get 1 out of 10, we're doing really well. Honestly,
Totally.
I mean, 9 out of 10 of them are going to fail
Yeah,
anyway.
you don't need all the ideas, but you need the occasional idea, and more importantly than that, you need the connection.
Right,
That's-
and
that's
so
what we're talking about, it's
if the entrepreneur or the employer says what do you think about this, and then you give me an answer, and the best question you can ask is well, what got you to that answer? Then
Right.
not only do you hear their way of thought, but then you hear their personal opinions, their experience, their backgrounds, their
Right.
stories that ultimately allowed them to form that opinion in the first place, and then you've got a 2 for 1 right there.
Nobody wants to feel like a cog in a machine, right? And I know that's such a cliche thing to say, but if you can't, even with a really hard labor job where they're slogging it out 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, making that person feel like their thoughts and ideas, give them an opportunity to strategize with you on something big or small. I'm convinced you buy yourself time with that employee.
Well-
You give that relationship more runway because
Yeah.
they go, you know what? I might just be on the end of a shovel right now because I just started here, but I matter to some degree.
But let's go back to what I might have said about 20 minutes ago. I think the one thing this generation wants more than previous generations, because they had it, is attention. And when I ask you what you think about something, and I'm not staring down at my phone or on a call or typing away at something else,
I've actually given
I'm giving you my attention.
Yeah.
And not only am I giving you my attention, in a way, I'm giving you my trust.
Yeah.
And when
Totally.
you can give that away, man, it is pretty cool to see what happens in return.
Yeah, and that is a fact. I think at least I've observed it very closely. Is that generations past, it's not so crucial to them as it is to this generation. It is an interesting theory what you say around while they look at all sorts of cool stuff during the day and people interact with them in a superficial way a lot of the times through technology, that real human connection isn't there for them as much as it would have been for someone in 1940 when we were physically together going through something hard like World War II or whatever. And I think that's an interesting thought that stereotype might come from there, which is that young people need to be involved in all. You can't just shut up, kid. This is what you're going to do. Right? They want to be involved.
I'll give you a very, really quick story. My friend Drew Green, he runs Indochino based out of here in Vancouver. And through the pandemic and through this retail apocalypse, they've been able to open a new Indochino shop every month for the last 6 years. So they've got over 70 Indochino shops all over North America, which is an incredible accomplishment just as it is.
A lot of people buying dress shirts when they don't go to the office.
True. Well, again, we're talking about a general population now too. And I asked him, I was like, Drew, how do you do this? How do you build a trust across your team? How do you build all of these shops in such a short period of time, despite everything that's happening in the world? And he said, well, I just make sure that trust is the number one thing on my team. I said, well, how are you, what's your number one strategy for building trust? And he said something that surprised me. He said, I ask for help. I said, okay, well, unpack that a little bit for me. He says, well, what happens when I ask for help is essentially what I'm telling the person that I'm asking help for. Is I'm giving you my trust first. And look, to be clear, he said, I don't mean I'm piling a bunch of work onto their plates, but if I'm asking you to help me with something that you know is really important to me, you know that I'm giving you my trust first. And when you need something in return, knowing that I already owe you one, you know you can trust me in return. And we've built this incredible sort of camaraderie and this sort of sense of connection and community where, look, the best way that he's building trust is actually by asking for something.
Well, that's how you demonstrate it. If you ask somebody a question, there's implicit in that.
Which takes it right back to where it
That's
started.
implicit in that, hey, I'm asking you a question because I actually want your opinion. I
Yeah.
want your opinion because I trust you're intelligent. I trust
right.
you have perspective. I trust you.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable the connection that you can create and foster just by going to people and say, hey, can I get your take on something for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, you know, in more of the corporate world too, there's like all the engagement surveys that happen, and there's all the survey fatigue and everything else. I checked the numbers, and on average, 24% of engagement surveys are acted on. And so it's the best, you know, based on what you said, is it's kind of like, hey, what do you think about this thing?
Right.
And then just like looking away, like it's just such an empty question. But if you're there listening to the response and say, okay, great, here's what we're going to do about it. That's it. That's it. It's literally all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actionable item out of there. It doesn't have to be every one of your fun events or culture events, but in some places, think not just we're going to paintball together. We're going to go have some fun, but we're going to talk about actual stuff that's going on in our
It
organization.
could be on the job site prior to throwing a shovel in the ground or throwing paint on the wall or putting a shingle on the roof. You know, it doesn't have to be a bowling alley. It doesn't have to be a bar.
Right.
It certainly can be. And I think that these events are absolutely important. But the more we try and like manufacture these like fun events for the sake of fun, and by the way, we're going to do some like team building stuff too, you kind of lose the spontaneity of these ideas, because if someone's on the site and they've thought of something that's really cool, and they have to wait, you know, for the next hockey game to be able to share that, you've missed a big opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Benji, you and I were literally having lunch yesterday, like completely unrelated to anything sales related, and we're just ended up talking about huge things that could be changed in the sales process, right? This stuff just like comes up.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's very unstructured. It's very organic. But the point is, we were both there. We were both present. We didn't have our phones in front of us, and we weren't like, wasn't thinking about the thing that we have to do tomorrow.
Right.
As easy as that would have been, we just like, boom, let's dive into this for 20 minutes.
And that's why I say innovation's slow, because you have to create that time first. Either of you could have said, no, I've got a call, I've got a meeting, I've got something.
Yeah.
I'm going to have lunch at my desk. I'm going to do like whatever it is. There could be 100 excuses why you didn't go do that. And we like to think the benefit is that we get to go and hang out together for lunch. And sure, that's absolutely a benefit. But I actually think that that's actually a byproduct where the true benefit is be able to have conversations like this that you could have never planned.
Yeah. Eric, I want to share with you sort of a final. I'll paint a picture. I want your take on it, and maybe this is a good place as any to close. This is like a tale of two individuals.
Okay.
So one, good student in high school, goes to university, gets a business degree. Maybe they do a couple years in the workforce. Maybe they go back to do an MBA. Maybe they go back to get a CFA, whatever. Let's say they're 30, 35 now. They've been grinding it out in a cubicle, dressing up for work every day. They feel meaningless. They're not actually making as much money as they thought they would by going this route, to say nothing of inflation. I'm talking about actual people in my life right now.
And a bit of debt they might have.
This isn't an archetype. Like these are actual friends that I have who they said, you know what, this is the route. I'm going to go do this. They're miserable on some level.
Sure.
Okay. Here's the other picture. Young guy who goes, you know what? I really like working with my hands. I'm gonna be a landscaper because I love it. I'm gonna be a carpenter because I love it. When they make that decision, they consciously go, I don't know if this is gonna lead to much, but I like it. Fast forward 10 to 15 years later, they're 30 to 35. They've got a business. They own some real estate. They've got a huge skill set. Their business is multifaceted. They're investing in cool things. The person who went the route that they thought was going to, deliver them to the promised land is now miserable. The person who went the route that is maybe going to lead them to nowhere now is an entrepreneur making a ton of money, having an awesome life. How on earth are universities like winning this battle on some level? And what do our entrepreneurs need to do to showcase that lifestyle? Tell the story, because it's there. We're not making this up. It's actually happening.
Real,
it's actually there. How do we bridge this gap? How do we communicate with people so that they go, I want what he has, or I want what she has?
Yeah, super easy question for sure. I don't know if I have a good answer, because it's insanely complicated. But I do have a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
the first thing takes me back to Igor's grandma, okay? And the manual labor that she had to do to put food on the plate and keep the clothes washed and then dried. Then I look at our parents who were heavily influenced by our grandparents, and they were thinking, do whatever the hell you can to not live the life that I did so that I could afford the quality of life that you got. By the way, I gave everything that I had to be able to put you into university so that you didn't have the quality of life that I did. We're not that far away from those people. And so our parents, in many cases, were saying, like, you're going to university so you don't have to live the life that I did, right? Because that's the American dream. That is what we're supposed to do. We're talking dog, cat, son, daughter, white picket fence, an SUV in the driveway, maybe even a goldfish. That would be awesome. These things have to take time. Generational changes happen, in this case, these generational changes happen every 15 to 20 years. And so it is incremental. What the pandemic has shown us is that we have very much in the last 16 or 18 or 20 months or whatever it might be, we have as a society very much redefined what it means to be successful. And by that, I mean, it's not just the amount of money that we have in our wallet, the NFTs that we can buy, though some might think different, maybe even here. But it's going to be the quality of life that we have, realizing that the time with our family is short, life is precious, life is very fragile, and now we can sort of recalibrate as to what it means to be successful. Would I push anyone who wants to go the CFA route away from that? No, what I would ask them is, like, why do you really want it? Is it because your parents want you to do it, or is it because you want to do it? Because I think the real answer to your question is, where are those pressures, those influences, and most importantly, where is that education coming from? Yeah. Because my guess is the parental factor is far more heavy than we'd like to admit. Who do we want to be proud of us? Ourselves? In my case, no. I would way rather my parents be proud of me than me proud of myself, for sure. Which is what pushed me into this entrepreneurial journey in the first place. And I think when we start to see the quality of life, the stories being told, the understanding of what we can build in the space, when we start showcasing the lives of the people that already work with us, that do such incredible jobs and have built incredible families and businesses along the way, that if we were to fast forward this conversation another 2 generations down the road, I think education is going to be different. I think the debt situation is going to be different. I think the definition of success is going to be different. Right. And the main thing that we're going to be going for is ultimate happiness in a lifestyle. And I think if we can start to tell that story now and educate parents, like almost a reverse education, then I think we're going to have a lot more success.
Pendulum will start to swing back.
Yeah. And with the right kind of messaging from an employer brand perspective, there are really cool stories to be told.
To be told and not told yet. And I'm not saying that there are no stories being told, but I think that's where the greatest opportunity is.
Yeah. My probably single biggest takeaway from our conversation here today is to own who you are in your industry and as a company.
Be proud of it.
Be proud of it, because that message, to what Eric's saying, is going to resonate with the right set of people, not with everybody, but with the right set of people. If you know who you are and you articulate it well, as an employer brand, the right people will come, but you have to be able to tell those stories.
It's funny, we have no problem doing that with politics, right? Or with like COVID and how we stand on that. We have no problem broadcasting it to the world. But we think that because we might have a little bit of paint underneath our fingernails, that people don't want to hear about that. Like, come on,
because it's not as cool as working at Zoom.
No,
it's not on Instagram.
Yeah. Be proud of it. Honor it. Communicate it as well as you can. And I think you might be pleasantly surprised by how many Gen Zers want that also. And remember, you don't need all of them. No. You're looking for a few of them.
One at a time, usually. Totally. Maybe I'll close in saying that when you try and be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to anyone. Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem.
Eric, I really, really love this. Where can people find out a bit more about you and your work?
We'll probably put in the show notes, just like erictermuende.com. You can check out my book, Rethink Work. And if anyone wants to continue the conversation, tell me I'm absolutely crazy for what I'm thinking. I'm absolutely open to it too.
Awesome. Cool. Great. Cool. Check out Eric's website. His last name is hard to spell. I still sometimes have trouble with it.
I mean, it's almost right on the show notes, but we're close.
So check it out in the link in the description. We'll link over to Eric's website. But Eric, thanks so much for being on today, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of Contractor Evolution. If you've already subscribed to our channel, consider sharing this episode with another contractor who you think needs to hear it.